Hello, and welcome to the lecture on ethical research. In this lecture, I'm going to be discussing basic concepts of maintaining your ethics as a researcher whenever you're presenting a research project. This does include definitions of plagiarism and things like the common knowledge rule. Part of becoming a scholar is learning good research practices. Ethical research includes a respect for diverse opinions, as well as acknowledgement of your sources. So this lecture will discuss how to cite your sources too. Let's start with a definition of plagiarism. Plagiarism is intentionally copying someone's research and claiming it is yours. This can occur whether it's in the form of direct quote or even if you put it into your own words. So please remember, if you're reading someone else's source and then you go and use some information that you learned from that source without acknowledging where that information came from, that is plagiarism because you need to give that person credit for the ideas that you're using. It is a violation of academic integrity to not list where you got the information that you used. So please be sure that you're keeping track as you begin research because you will want to make sure that any ideas that you draw from are cited in your final project. Here are some basic principles to remember. When you turn something in, you're claiming that it is yours. If you don't cite something, that implies that you're saying to the audience, everything here is original to me. So it's very important to distinguish what you contributed versus what other people have contributed. So if you borrow someone's ideas in any form, whether that's an image, a video clip, an actual quotation, or a paraphrase, so on and so forth, whatever ideas or information you borrow, you should give them credit through citations. Online materials as well as print must be cited correctly. So if you're influenced in the source by any way as you're working on your research project, please write down where that source information came from so that you can create a citation to include in your paper. Now, one question that I get a lot is about common knowledge topics. A situation of common knowledge would be something like if you decided to write about fashion, but you actually already know a lot about fashion because it's out there in the culture and you've learned it just from general knowledge. Or, for example, with sports, perhaps you watch a lot of sports and you just know a lot about sports already. You don't really need to do any research about certain things because you carry that knowledge yourself, even though it might be specialized and seem like you need to do research in order to know that. What you need to do in those situations is follow a common knowledge 3-person rule. The first thing, of course, to remember is that if you use word-for-word quotes from any source, you need to cite it. Those words are not your words, so even if you knew the information that the person is talking about, you still have to acknowledge that those words belong to them. So don't cut and paste material and claim it as your own. That's the most basic entry level, do not do that, or it will be plagiarism. But for that more general, broad knowledge information or material that might be common knowledge, you can use what's called the 3-person rule. So if you ask 3 random people, and these are not your friends, but people that are just randomly walking around in society, would the information that you want to use in your paper or your project, would that be knowledge that they know? So just random people that are not all your age, they're not your friends, they don't come from the same communities as you, but randomly you select 3 people. Would those people be able to describe the same situations or information that you want to use? If so, you can paraphrase information in your own words without a citation. If not, you want to include the citation to show where you got your information from. And this might involve you actually having to go and find a source that has information that you personally already know about. But it could be that it's so specialized that 3 people may not actually know that information. So you need to show that other people have talked about it already and how you're adding to that conversation. So I have an example here. Who is LeBron James? If you asked 3 random people this question, probably they would be able to tell you information about him and his career. He's so famous that he has become common knowledge. So as long as you put information in your own words and stick to information most people would know, you can describe him without a citation. However, you have another question that's a little more specialized. Who is Luigi Pirandello? 3 random people would probably not be able to tell you information about him. If you're curious, he's an author. You should include a citation for any sources that you use about Pirandello, even if you put the information in your own words. So if I'm describing him and his background and his life, I need to cite that information. And this would be true for a more specialized figure, for example, in sports. Maybe three random people wouldn't be able to tell you specifics about a more minor NBA basketball player who's not as famous as LeBron James. If that's the case, then you're going to need to find information that gives the same context that you want to describe, and then cite that information to show people where they can go to learn more about that person. So keep the three-person rule in mind as you think about whether or not to cite information that could be common knowledge. The next couple of slides are going to talk about how to avoid plagiarism. This first slide has to do with using quotes effectively and is taken from information in your textbook. First of all, don't let others speak for you. Quotes should be used sparingly, and you really do not want to overquote. The purpose of quotations is to show that there are other people out there having a conversation about your topic. You don't want to represent that entire conversation by having all of those people speak for you. Instead, you're going to be speaking, and those people will chime in occasionally, either to act as foils that you can argue against or to act as support for you. But the main thing you should always ask yourself before you use a quote is whether or not you really need that voice in your essay. One way that you can do that is to take an active stance. You want to establish your own argument and make your voice primary. You also want to quote accurately and fairly. Don't misrepresent an author's argument just to support your own position. So you don't want to take them out of context and make them seem like they're saying something that they're not actually saying. As I mentioned, quotes should work as support to your writing. Therefore, they should be used in a context that you establish. Your own argument and your own writing will set the parameters for the conversation, and then you will use someone as support or as contrast. You don't want to just drop in a quote. You need to introduce it to prepare readers for why it needs to be there, and then after you've used the quote, you want to explain it. So readers need you to guide them in understanding your sources. You are the interpreter. You're going to introduce, quote, and explain. This is a good method for establishing how to use quotes effectively, and it will help keep you inside the parameters of avoiding plagiarism because you're acknowledging that someone else has said these things and then providing that citation. Another way to avoid plagiarism is to remember that there are two places to cite your material in your project. First, you should cite the source in parentheses at the end of the quoted or summarized material by using the author's last name and a page or paragraph number if appropriate. So here's an example. Even if you know what plagiarism is and wouldn't think about doing it, you can still plagiarize unintentionally. And then in parentheses, the person who wrote that quote, authors Greene and Lidinsky, and the page number where that quote appears, 193. You put the period at the very end of the quotation, including at the end of the parentheses. You're also going to cite that quote in a works cited list at the very end of the project, at the very last page. The works cited list is a list of all sources used in the project. That includes any media sources as well as quotations. So as an example from the quote on the left, my citation would look like this. Greene, Stuart, and April Lidinsky, period. From Inquiry to Academic Writing, A Practical Guide, period, which is the title of the textbook. The publisher information, Bedford St. Martin's, comma, and the date, 2008, period. So this information goes on the last page. That way, if someone is curious about what Greene and Lidinsky said about plagiarism on page 193, they then flip to the back of my project. They see that citation, they can look up the book themselves and go to that page and see the context further information about what they're saying. This is the purpose of citations. They're references that allow your readers to find that information quickly and easily and show the bigger part of the conversation that might be going on surrounding your topics. There are many different types of citation styles in use across several different disciplines. This semester, we will practice the MLA citation style. The hardest part of creating a works cited list is identifying what type of source that you used. But once you know the type, you can follow the formula for the citation. We'll be learning how to identify sources by using the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, or Purdue OWL website, as well as a handbook that you may have purchased in 1101 and brought into this course. We'll be looking at those different types of citation styles and learning which one is the most appropriate for the type of source that you found. In many cases, you may be finding internet sources that don't have complete information, and we'll talk about how to fill in the blanks and whether or not you need to have all information for a citation or not, depending on the style of the source. This week, we're going to start practicing reading and incorporating sources into our writing. Please view the discussion instructions and read the example carefully. You're going to practice reading, writing, and responding to a critical article about pop culture. You're then going to incorporate a quote and cite it in your reply to your peer. So please review the lecture and readings for help and use the Need Help thread with any questions. Remember, too, that the main thing to remember about citations and avoiding plagiarism is that you need to demonstrate a good faith effort to be an ethical researcher. As long as you're showing a good faith effort to be an ethical researcher by including citations and a list of your information, then you're on the track to being a good scholar. Thanks.